My name's Josh. So I'm a member of the GNU Radio board, currently serving as the president. And I want to bring an update of the project. And so a lot of the talk this week has been focused on GNU Radio 4.0. So I want to bring it back to kind of the current state of GNU Radio and how we bring 4.0 into the community as broader adoption. So first we have to ask ourselves a question: what is GNU Radio, and what makes GNU Radio kind of special as an SDR framework? So we heard some of this from Eric the other day in terms of where GNU Radio came from. And so I want to kind of address it as to what the current state of the project is. So GNU Radio, is it an SDR application? Not really. So GNU Radio, it's not something that we can just ship as an application and say, here's GNU Radio, and then hot swap it in with something else. This is GNU Radio now. It enables all sorts of applications. Particle accelerators, digitizing in that context being one of them. But as it is an SDR framework, the biggest part of GNU Radio is that it is a framework, a community, and altogether that, an ecosystem. So there's a lot of factors to consider when we talk about GNU Radio that make it something very special in terms of software-defined radio. Where is GNU Radio used? So particle accelerators was something that was never on my radar when I first started using GNU Radio. So traditionally, the wireless communications realm is where people think of GNU Radio being used. How do you send, receive signals? There's heavy usage in amateur radio. There's a big user base in radio astronomy, space communications, everywhere imaginable where signals are being sent and received over the air, or anything that's digitized needs signal processing in a block-based graph model. If you do a quick search on Google Scholar, if you just search GNU Radio, you'll see all sorts of things you couldn't imagine where GNU Radio is being used. A few examples, and then this list goes on. There's thousands of papers published every year about using GNU Radio SDR. But I want to talk a bit more broadly about the GNU Radio ecosystem and the community. So GNU Radio, let's see, I don't know, there's no pointer here. But GNU Radio, so we have organized in a way, so in the last, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, we shifted from, I guess, what Eric described as the benevolent dictator model to a more structured organization. And as we move further away from the initial group of people that created the software, it's very important to make sure that we have a sustainable leadership going forward. So the way we're structured is we have the General Assembly, we have a 3-person board, and a General Assembly which is not bounded by size. So the General Assembly is a group of people who meet together every so often, a couple times a month, and talk about the current state of GNU Radio, help set the priorities, and then also elect the board. And the board is responsible for the finances of the organization, for what we're going to do with our technical priorities, non-technical priorities. And we are also fiscally associated with, perfect, thank you. Let's see, and then this goes, yeah, perfect. So we are incorporated under the SETI Institute. So they manage all our finances and logistics. So that has enabled us to have a partner in acquiring grants, managing logistics of our money, of our finances, because GNU Radio, if you're not aware, is an all-volunteer organization. We don't have within ourselves a paid staff. It's a grouping of, the leadership is a grouping of people with varied interests, and they're all there for very different reasons. Some people are enthusiasts about just loving radio, loving working on the software. Others are there because it associates well with their job. but it's a very diverse group of people. So in a structural sense, we organize ourselves around teams, and these teams might be, say, the GRC team. It might be the 4.0 development architecture working group team. There might be interest groups, such as the amateur radio interest group. And these are things that are kind of ad hoc, and mostly we work together on our chat server. So if you've never gotten onto chat.gnuradio.org, that's really where most of the activity takes place. So in terms of organization, that is really where we consider GNU Radio, where the decisions are made. Now, the broader ecosystem, there's a lot of people that aren't necessarily part of the leadership of GNU Radio, but do extremely important work in the community, such as, I'll highlight here, distribution packaging. So something that's happened over the last, 5 years or so is the ability to just go into your Ubuntu install and just say apt install GNU Radio. A ton of work went into making that happen. A ton of coordination with the maintainer. So I think, Marcus, you got our earlier releases to the point where they could be packaged in that way. Yes. but Maitland Bottoms, who does that effort on the Debian side, and then these roll into Ubuntu. There is Ryan Voles, who works at Haystack Observatory, puts together all the Conda releases. And this enables GNU Radio to be very easily installed on Windows and Mac within the Conda framework. And then, Fedora, any Linux installation, there's somebody that is doing the effort to make sure GNU Radio stays up to date on those. And that is something that really we don't even have visibility into all the different packaging. So these are just people in the community that help out and make that happen. We also have, we do GNU Radio Conference and many events throughout the year. So we have organizers involved in that. And such as this event and the EU GR days. And then also from a technical standpoint, the code base. The code base is kind of shepherded by a group of maintainers, and we'll talk a bit more about that in a minute. But from a technical standpoint, that is done again on an all-volunteer basis. Another important, and I think back to the original question of what makes GNU Radio so special, the ecosystem of out-of-tree modules. You can go out onto the internet and find an out-of-tree module that does something that you might be interested in, something you didn't even know about, but there's all these out-of-tree modules managed by individuals that keep them up to date, and we try to archive them on cgran.org. But again, that's, as an open source project, you don't quite have visibility into everything. So that is just a kind of an ecosystem unto itself. All of our communication methods, chat, tutorials, which there's been a lot of effort over the last couple of years to update those tutorials with the latest versions of GNU Radio and make the examples up to date. So a lot of work has gone into that. We have our website, the wiki, and then the mailing list, and also our social media. And then also, part of the GNU Radio ecosystem is projects that are affiliated with GNU Radio or are built on top of GNU Radio, such as you might be familiar with GQRX. Some of the newer ones, like IQ Engine, aren't necessarily GNU Radio based, but they store data in the SIGMF format, which is a metadata format for storing IQ recordings that was kind of born out of the GNU Radio community. So there's a lot of different projects that are affiliated with GNU Radio, but not specifically part of our community. So just kind of want to give a broad view of the ecosystem of GNU Radio. This button. All right. So in terms of leadership, as I mentioned, we have a 3-person board. Currently, I'm serving as the president. But the board is elected by the General Assembly. The General Assembly is a group of people that have some sort of leadership position in the community. For instance, Jean-Michel Friet is a leader in the academic outreach and the organization of this conference. And he's a vital member of the GA because he has insight into a big part of the community here. So the General Assembly, just to give you an idea, is 12, 13 people right now, but it's not bounded. And we do look to expand the GA as people take on more leadership areas in the community. We also, another key position in the leadership is the SETI PI. So we are financially organized under SETI. And so Derek Kozel serves as the principal investigator with SETI to help manage that interface, help bring in grants, manage our contracts, things like that. So then also there's various technical roles, community roles. So that's just a general overview of how our leadership is structured. It's not, I'm not in charge of the project. There's a lot of people that have various levels of involvement. So I like to joke about the title president, but it's not a super powerful, bang my hammer type of position here. And the SETI Institute, so they are our partners, and they've been a great partner here. They help us, they give us inroads into various avenues of development, application, education. They manage a lot of logistics, help us gain access to grants and educational outreach. So I want to talk a bit about the current state of GR3. Before we talk at all about GR4, I want to say where GR3 has gone over the last year, where it's going, still things that we want to do there, because when we talk about GNU Radio, when most people think about GNU Radio, it is GR3. So thanks to very active maintenance by Jeff Long and Marcus and others that are involved in the maintenance team, over the last couple of years, you've seen very consistent GNU Radio releases happening every quarter or so. And this is thanks to ongoing hard work from that team. And one of the things I want to highlight is this release right here, 3.10.9, made it into Ubuntu 24.04. So there's some timing involved in there to where you get everything lined up perfectly and it rolls into Ubuntu, and then now folks can just apt install GNU Radio in Ubuntu and have a very up-to-date version. So that is quite an impressive feat. Then, when I first started working on GNU Radio, you had pi bombs, and it was not the easiest thing to get GNU Radio running. We also have had several Volk releases over the last year or so, thanks to Johannes as the maintainer of that project. So say hi to Johannes. But one thing I would like to highlight here is that GNU Radio is looking for additional maintainers. So maintenance is done as a team effort. If you are interested in getting involved in that, so if there's a piece of the code base that you're specifically passionate about or know something about and would like to really focus on the pull requests that come in there and kind of own that module, I'd love to hear from you and see more people get involved there. Our goal, well, not our goal, I'd say the reality of the situation is we probably will reduce the number of maintenance releases, so they've been coming about every quarter. We plan on bringing that down just a little bit because the number of things that have been added and fixed over the last year has been slowing a bit, which is a good problem. Most of the things coming in right now have been focused on the new GRC Qt and getting that up to feature parity with the traditional GRC. So, but any help, if anyone's interested in helping with release management, rolling out releases, maybe 2-3 times a year instead of 4 times a year, that would be greatly appreciated. So email us if you are interested in any capacity here. So let's talk about some of the things from a development standpoint that have been happening very recently. So most of the development work on GNU Radio has happened thanks to a generous grant from ARDC, which is the Amateur Radio Digital Communications Organization. So we got this grant we applied for and received this grant from ARDC about 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, and a substantial grant focused on the usability enhancements in GNU Radio. So GNU Radio as a framework it's only useful to a broader group of people if it's usable and accessible. And so that was the goal of this funding. So some of the things that have happened under this funding, one is the ability to install GNU Radio and out-of-tree modules using native installers. So right now, you can install GNU Radio in Windows through Conda. That's not necessarily accessible, say, in an educational setting. But the ability to just download, GNUradio.msi and let's say grwifi.msi and install those just like you would any other Windows program. So that's the goal of making these installation packages of GNU Radio and out of tree for both Windows and Mac. So that work is wrapping up, and we hope to have an announcement soon on that, to where you can just go to GNUradio.org, download the installation packages, double-click on them, and be able to install GNU Radio that way. Ongoing software maintenance and support. Of course, things get backed up in our issues and PR log, and so Marcus was able to thrash the issue tracker there to triage everything that was in, say, you know what, we're not going to fix this, we're deferring this to 4.0, so be able to make a lot of decisions, categorize things to where we can point people in the right direction and say, yes, this is where we need help with. No, these are issues that are great for first-time contributors, things like that. And then also some of the low-hanging fruit, just go ahead and fix it. So thanks to Marcus, we were able to make a lot of progress and clean up the issue tracker in that way. Yes. So one of the big efforts here on this grant was beginning the process of updating GNU Radio Companion to be based on Qt instead of GTK. So GTK, I guess kind of an ongoing problem with an open source project with dependencies is that as time goes on, some of these dependencies become more and more unwieldy. GTK is one of those, so that's one of the more difficult things to package and manage in GNU Radio. So getting it up to using Qt as the graphical front end became a priority. The other thing that Qt enables is it enables GRC to be able to run under WebAssembly in a browser. So that was shown at some point, I think before this effort really kicked off. But if you take the current main branch of GNU Radio, so not the version that showed up in Ubuntu recently, but the current main branch of GNU Radio, and you run GNU Radio to Companion --Qt, you'll see the Qt version of GNU Radio. So it is not quite up to feature parity, but it's getting there, and that is the path forward. So again, if you're a Python person and you're interested in getting involved in contributing some code, that is a great place to help out and add things. Another effort is ongoing updating of our tutorials. So when people first start using GNU Radio, it's like, well, what do I do with this thing? Here's GRC, I've got a whole bunch of blocks, I want to write my own blocks. Our tutorials had gotten out of date as GNU Radio had transitioned over time from, say, 3.7 to 3.10. A lot of the blocks that were used in the tutorials had become deprecated. So WaveWalker DSP went through and updated all of our tutorials and the example flow graphs to match the current state of GNU Radio. So just kind of important ongoing maintenance of our documentation. And then related to that, Bailey Campbell is in the process of updating our documentation infrastructure. So right now we have a lot of information on the wiki, and we have a lot of stuff in the code in Doxygen, and those are kind of two separate worlds. And so the goal here is to bring it all together and have versioned documentation through the CI that comes out and can show up on readthedocs.io. So just kind of modernizing our documentation infrastructure there. And then the last piece of this, we had a bit of funding left at the end of this, and the whole goal is GNU Radio usability enhancements. And looking forward to GR4, we want GR4 to be usable. So this is where Danny Estevez started working with us, and I will not talk too much about this because he has the next presentation, I believe. But having a documented example of something that people do in GNU Radio, but using the GNU Radio 4.0 code base. So that I will leave that to Danny to talk more about. Just a little more, not too much detail here, but yeah, the Qt version of GRC, it is there. It continually gets better. So the screenshot might not look great because this is from a few months ago. But yeah, the idea is it is exactly the same thing visually as GRC, just running with Qt instead of GTK. So another area where we get additional development effort is through Google Summer of Code program. So this year, we fortunately had 2 GSOC students. We had Kayla Comer and Zaki Hermelon. So Kayla Comer worked on beefing up our grFEC package. I believe this was adding affect as a way to do the LDPC coding, and just generally overhauling and improving our grFEC. So thank you to Andre, Danny, I believe Marcus, Johannes, you're probably involved in this as well. And then Zaki, so the goal of this is to take GRC. So there's a lot of potential for GRC as a front end to do a lot more things rather than just render a GNU Radio flow graph. So the effort here is to kind of modularize GRC and enable custom workflows that I can say, I might not just want, you have a few choices in GRC. You can, make your blocks render to you can make it render to a Qt type of flow graph. You can render to a C++ program. So there might be more things. So modularize that and have a type of workflow. I might want to render it to use some other graphical library, things like that. And so thanks to Zaki, but also thanks to Sebastian and Hakan for mentoring there. And also, we'll keep in mind, we'll make announcements. The next round of GSOC, that happens in the spring when we start announcing that. So spring or summer? May, yeah. So yeah. Who knows? We go through this every year. So yeah, keep your ears open. If you know students that would be interested in this. So what else do we want to do with GR3? We don't want it to become a stale project. We want to continually add things, make it better, make it more stable. So just some things that in the board and leadership we've talked about that are kind of on our view here. One is SIGMF integration. I think SIGMF is a great addition to the overall SDR ecosystem. It is. How many people in here are familiar with SIGMF? Show of hands, about half? Okay, cool. So if you're not familiar with SIGMF, it is a metadata format for RF radio recordings, or for any type of RF IQ data. There's a lot of different things you could do with it, but it enables you to describe, to have the binary data of the capture or captures, and then have the metadata right along with it in a way that's very portable, very simple, and we see this becoming standardized in a lot of areas. And so having that kind of natively as the way of recording data within GNU Radio, that's a very high priority for us because the whole format originated out of the GNU Radio community. Another thing that we definitely would like to improve going forward is the aesthetics of our graphical widgets. So we have these if you run a flow graph and you put a waterfall plot there, we have these Qt widgets, and there's lots of options for doing different types of visualization here. So even just within GNU Radio, we could probably make these prettier. They look, they look a little bit older. We talked about the native installers for Windows and Mac. That gives us a lot more avenues for accessibility into different communities if we're able to very easily install on Windows and Mac. Again, also documentation infrastructure, GRC Qt, really getting that up to feature parity so we can eventually drop the GTK dependency is highly desired. And then as part of our CI, right now we do unit testing of all the modules in the CI, but it would be nice if we could get more integrated tests across modules, running data through, say, our FEC encoders through an entire digital comms chain inside our CI. And then another piece of this that has been talked about a lot in the organization is improvements to CGRAN. So right now, if you go to cgran.org, you'll see a big list of out-of-tree modules, but the state of those is kind of, it's unknown. It varies how long ago they were updated. But being able to track that more closely, perhaps have a curated list of out-of-tree modules in the community, that's something that we could probably do a better job at and will work towards over the next, in the near future. All right, and something I should mention here is some of these do apply to both GR3X and 4.0. Holistically, these are things we should be keeping our eye on. So I want to bring out a vision for the project that we have discussed within the board, things we want to focus on, and start to talk about how 4.0 fits into all of this. So our vision generally is to strengthen the project, spread the project, sustain the project. I apologize for the alliteration, but really these three aspects are where we want to go to make GNU Radio last for the next 20 years and beyond that. So strengthen, what do I mean by that? What we want to do is we want to continually improve GNU. This might be a bit obvious, right? We want to make GNU Radio better. We want to make it stronger. We want to make it more feature-rich. But really, the purpose here, we want to maintain GNU Radio's position. We want our standing as the leading open source SDR framework for rapid prototyping and real-time signal processing applications. So we want to expand the usability of GNU Radio in scenarios where people might not be using it right now. So we want to make this code base as strong, stable, performant as possible. So this is one aspect of the vision. And why? GNU Radio enables innovation in scientific applications. So we want to be a part of that. We want GNU Radio to be a component where we say, this is where you can do your signal processing in a very accessible way. We would also like to spread the footprint of GNU Radio. So one place where we'd like to spread it more, where we, where we see some usage, we see GNU Radio being used in educational programs at universities, but we think there could be more. And it'd be good. Please come talk to me. I'd love to have these conversations about how we can get GNU Radio as a part of more university courses, as a part of even community college, high school. Somebody I was chatting with on the GNU Radio chat is actually using GNU Radio in a primary school with 4th graders. So I haven't followed back up. That was a couple months ago. So I'm curious how that went. It was a pilot program, but hey, if GNU Radio is a tool that can be used at that level, that would be fantastic. So we want to prepare the next generation of signal processing engineers, even starting at 4th grade, right? But we want people to have that feel for doing real-time signal processing. Learn the fundamentals, maybe using MATLAB and Python, but then move to that next step of doing real-time signal processing and getting a feel for that in their university courses. So how can we as an organization enable our partners in universities? How can we build a bigger network in the academic community? And so part of that, part of some of the things that I've heard is, one, being able to run more easily on Windows devices. That's something that in academics, that academic communities, that is there. But also keeping GNU Radio usability for beginners, installation methods, et cetera. Another thing that we know we suck at marketing. As an organization, we do our best, but we're not out there with really shiny emails and marketing. We have our mailing list. We have our chat server. That's definitely something that we could do. Are there a lot of people we're not reaching because we're not marketing the right way? We're not marketing how you should be marketing in 2024. So are there more people we could be reaching and say, hey, GNU Radio does this thing, and people can identify that and say, oh, I'm doing that thing. I could use GNU Radio rather than coding something up on my own. And then that's also training opportunities too, where we can identify the people that might be wanting to use GNU Radio, but there's that gap between, well, how do I actually get this into my ecosystem? So we can put them in contact with the right people. We can build up the training materials. And again, we have to ask ourselves, why is this part of the vision? Without this shared framework, we do lead to this fractured ecosystem. We want as many people using the tools as possible, because then the tools get better and better, rather than kind of, broken up, everyone reinventing the wheel every time. So in terms of, we're talking about the spread of GNU Radio. One of the challenges we have is it's hard to quantify how much GNU Radio is out there. So we have some insights into it, but we don't put tracking cookies on our website. We don't track our emails, things like that. So how can we know how many people are using GNU Radio? Well, one, we can look at various, like this is a plot of Google Scholar. How many publications over the years have used the term GNU Radio? So it's up over 1,000, and it's hovered around there. It's hard to keep up to date. So thank you for Jean-Michel for helping with this analysis. And in various ways you look at it, the numbers are different, but definitely there's a healthy number of academic publications using GNU Radio that make it onto Google Scholar. That's a little bit delayed, so this goes up to 2023, but it definitely has stayed healthy over the years and grown over time. Another one, this is visits to our GitHub repo. So it's just random week in August, there were 4,000 unique visitors to our GitHub repo. And then Conda Forge, so that's another, one of the newer ways that people can get and access GNU Radio. Now this here, it says 1 million total downloads. I don't know if I believe that number, or I think that's probably a lot of automated infrastructure, maybe bots, who knows. But there still seems to be a lot of people downloading GNU Radio from the Conda packaging, which is great, because a lot of work has gone into getting that integrated into our CI, and thanks to Ryan at Haystack for maintaining that very actively. So the third part of our vision here is to sustain the organization, sustain the project, both financially and in terms of leadership. So one, future-proof the leadership of the organization. So we want to continually build the leadership team. It can be a great opportunity, especially for developing professionals, to be involved in the project. There's opportunities to help with the maintenance team, to help in all aspects of the project. And yes, it's a great opportunity. It's definitely helped me in my career, being deeply involved in GNU Radio, and I think it opens up a lot of opportunities for people in their career. There's a lot of networking opportunities, so on and so forth. But as an organization, we want to move a bit beyond an all-volunteer organization. One of the things, so in terms of funding, so we're aligned with SETI Institute, but really the avenues for funding for GNU Radio right now come out of GNU Radio Conference. We get a little bit of funding that way, and what we're trying to do, where we would like to get to, so just being completely transparent, is we would like to have some paid administrative program management support, and to be able to have the ongoing funding to support that. So what we are looking at, and we're going to announce at GRCon, is an industry and government partnership program. So the details will be laid out in the next month or so. But yeah, so stay tuned for that. But then there's also, GNU Radio gets development work done, mostly by people that are funded external development efforts. Ralph and his team at FAIR are a great example of this. There's a need, there's an identity, there's identification that GNU Radio fits a need, and if we can add this into the framework rather than just doing it ourselves, then it benefits everyone. So external development efforts are really how a lot of things have gotten done over the years. And one example of this, which I'll highlight a bit more in a bit is there was a DARPA SDR 4.0 program, and this was done to add some specific features to GNU Radio that I'll talk about in a minute, but government-funded efforts, yes, are a great way to do much larger scale things than we can do with the smaller amounts of money that come in directly through GNU Radio. So why do we want to sustain the organization? Well, we want to maintain a healthy ecosystem, and having this cohesive organization, helps us to kind of keep our tabs on what's going on and make better decisions as a community and for the community. So now let's get to the exciting part. We're going to talk a bit about how 4.0, how do we get to 4.0? So first let's start, how do we get from GNU Radio 3 to where we're at talking about 4.0? So a brief history of 4.0. So look at this from a positive standpoint first. So we've got the negatives down here at the bottom. Let's look at the positive first. People want to do more with GNU Radio. So GNU Radio solves a lot of problems, a lot of very different problems for a lot of people. And there's a lot of people that are kind of pushing the bounds of GNU Radio. So moving beyond some of those limitations is something that people have talked about for years and years. So I'll identify some of the pain points that people have identified. And one is this fixed scheduling. Having the thread per block scheduling, it works great under a whatever percentage of use cases. It's enough. It's great. It's simple. But if you want to really game the performance of your computer running GNU Radio, it might not be ideal. Packetized asynchronous data processing, that was a mechanism that was added at some point and is not quite as optimized as the streaming mechanism. Effective use of hardware accelerators, general ease of use, having less boilerplate, different your documentation in different parts, and then also our ability to work on heterogeneous and distributed platforms. So we have to balance all of this, anything that we're going to fix, with one framework can't solve everyone's problem. So really our theme for the last several years has been modularity. That's what we want 4.0 is to be a modular solution to where we don't want to solve everyone's problem for everybody, but we want to carve out the places where there's something specific. You need something scheduled in a certain way. You need some real-time, low-latency scheduling. Well, you can develop a scheduler for that. So I'm jumping ahead a little bit. So let's get back to the history. So the first I really started getting involved or aware of the push towards a new GNU Radio or a next big thing was the work that Bastian and Marcus did towards benchmarking and untangling the scheduler within GNU Radio. So the links are here. Blogs are very they're very thorough. There was a paper published at GRCon. Marcus presented this and really identified quantitatively what are the weak points of GNU Radio and what we should do better. And one of the big things here is the thread per block scheduler. We're leaving a lot of processing on the table by doing all that context switching, especially when you have one thread per block and a lot more blocks than cores. So this was 5 years ago. The next FOSDEM, we got together. There was, several of us got together. This was at ISA in Nordvik, and really the conclusion going into that was we're going to have to build something from the ground up in order to untangle the scheduler, to do something more modular. And so this led to what we had called for a long time the New Sketch project. It eventually became the Dev 4.0 branch on GNU Radio. So this was generally the same design as GR3, just kind of broken up, more modularized, and then some improvements in usability as well. There were various schedulers. Again, there was a single-threaded scheduler, there was a multi-threaded scheduler, and you could swap them in. and you could set the number of blocks per thread. Now going back to Basti's paper here. So Basti took the GR3 code base. He benchmarked it in a very thorough way and showed how much throughput you could get through a flow graph using however many cores and however many threads you're running, and then in a way that represented what you could do by matching the number of cores and threads, showed that you could get this like 2 or 3x performance boost by doing that. And in this project, we were able to show actually in a GNU Radio-like implementation, something that was on the path to become the next 4.0. We showed this same type of performance improvement. So that was good. Good path. We demonstrated the features at GRCon 2022. Kind of along the way was this SDR 4.0 project, and this was all interrelated, all happening at the same time. So SDR 4.0, again, hitting one of the pain points of GNU Radio is that GNU Radio has had, I should say, this is upstreamed. This made it into the 3.x code base, but at the time, GNU Radio had a kind of a fixed buffering scheme. It would make its own circular buffers, which is still there. And then in order to get into a hardware accelerator, like into a GPU or into the DMA memory of an FPGA, you would have to do that copy. You'd have to ingress into that memory, do your processing on the GPU, go back out into GNU Radio, GNU Radio's buffers, and back in. And that really, you killed the entire benefit of using a hardware accelerator at that point. So this program, the decision was made early on that this would go into 3, but this was one of the key driving factors of GNU Radio 4.0. And the end effect of this project, so this was demonstrated and the update given at GRCon 21, is that there is a set of custom buffers that you can create your own. It's custom, right? But there's an example for CUDA buffers, and what you can do here is you can, say, have your source. You can go into a block that's doing some GPU processing, that's calling CUDA kernels, keep the memory in the GPU, do another GPU processing block, another GPU processing block. And the end result of that is that we get rid of all of this waste of doing the mem copies in and out of the GPU. So this is in 3.10. If you're not aware of this feature and this is useful to you, it is documented on the wiki, wiki.gnuradio.org. Just search custom buffers so you can find out more. But so this was a step towards 4.0. It just happened to get upstreamed into GR3. Now, this feature probably was a lot more effort to get working in GR3 because of various aspects of the history of buffers, things like that. But it's there, and that was a step along the way. But so here's where it starts to get interesting. A couple of years ago, we met Ralph and the team here at FAIR, and so I believe Derek first introduced us to Ralph because GNU Radio was being used very heavily here at FAIR in their digitizers at the accelerator, and we were at this point developing something towards 4.0. It was a very good entry point to add in features that would be helpful for the setup here. And so Ralph engaged very closely with us and started working towards this 4.0 code base. I think specifically for this reflection feature was something that was missing in GNU Radio and would have been something very hard to add into GNU Radio 3. But along the way, as this kind of relationship began to progress, Ralph and the team here identified other things that we could be doing better. We could squeeze even more performance out of these CPUs that are running GNU Radio And so I'm not going to get into the technical details. That's Ralph's talk and all of these tutorials, but specifically focused on CPU-based processing. We got kind of put this project aside a bit and went full on towards what is now in the code base as GNU Radio 4. So a lot of exciting features that we kind of couldn't do in the microservice architecture, things like block merging and single point of source. So again, this was a very, I would say, unlikely collaboration. Who knew that GNU Radio was used at particle accelerators? I had no idea at the time, but this has turned out to be fantastic for the project. So I would be completely remiss if I did not say how grateful we are as an organization to this engagement with FAIR. The fact that that you guys have become an integral part of this community, and could have done things in a way that only solved your problem, but kind of in the spirit of public money, public code, looked at the broader open source community and said, hey, we can contribute, we can take our stuff and help everybody with it, and just help advance scientific innovation more broadly. So yeah, round of applause for Ralph, the team at FAIR. I really... So Ralph pointed us to this initiative that I was not previously aware of, Public Money, Public Code. So if you have not signed on to this initiative, recommend it. GNU Radio, our logo is there, so we support this cause. It's pretty open. Just code paid by the people should be available to the people, and that is, that is kind of where we're at with this engagement right now. So now, I think the broader question is, how do we get to 4.0 adoption? So that the code base, the 4.0 code base can sit there. It can be used by FAIR, but how do we get this used broader by the community? And not just used broader by the community. We want this to be a community-maintained project like GNU Radio is currently. We want that eventually to become GNU Radio. What is GNU Radio 4? Eventually, that's just when you say GNU Radio, that's GNU Radio. The tough part here is that if you look at GNU Radio 3, there's a lot of people that depend on it. There's a lot of, and again, open source project, we don't have entirely great introspection into everyone that's using it, but it's packaged in distributions. People have built applications on it. There's public out-of-tree modules, and then there's an entire user base that uses all of this. And not to this degree, but it starts to look like the classic XKCD, right? You pull out this one Jenga block, the whole thing's going to fall apart. So I look at it this way. So here's a little visual. So we've got GR3 that has kind of evolved over time, and now we've got this big advancement GR4 sitting there, and it's somewhere. There's a summit here that we want to get to, but if you're right here, it looks like a roadblock, right? So here, so this guy, he's the happy GR3 user. He's not performance critical. He's out here, maybe he's just replaying files. Maybe he's just doing an FM radio, right? Teaching it in a university course, not using the full capabilities. And then there's this guy that's really like pushing the boundaries of GR3. And this was me. This is really, I want more. I want that. This is what has led us to talk about GR4 for the last 5-10 years. And then there's all these other people that are kind of left out in the dark. Maybe they don't fit into GR3, but GR4 could be an entry point into the GNU Radio world for whatever reason. Could be licensing, could be just the way that GNU Radio is installed, all the dependencies or not. So really, we have to consider all of these people. Oh, and there's more. Okay. So the question: what will it take to facilitate and accelerate adoption? obvious statement, benefits outweigh the transition cost. There's going to be transition cost going from a completely rewritten framework from something that, that you're used to using and have built your infrastructure around. So right now, what are the most appealing benefits that 4.0 can offer? It varies from person to person. For some, if you're running an RTL SDR on a Raspberry Pi, it's not performance critical. GNU Radio 3.0 might do the job. But we have to consider those people in this. But I think the biggest thing that it will take to accelerate adoption of GR4 is showing the examples of the benefits. And that's why I'm excited about Danny's work. Is going to be the ability to contrast the performance between GR3 and GR4. So with tangible examples, it means more to people than benchmarks, right? You can show that, in this benchmark, I'm going to get so much improvement. Well, it's much more accessible to people to say, hey, I'm running a modem and I can get 4 times the throughput performance. That means a lot more to somebody that might want to fund development towards GNU Radio. And then also there might be new applications enabled by GR4. So we've gotten contacted over the years. People, for various reasons, are unable to use GR3 because of licensing. And I don't get into this talk, but one of the things that really has been enabled by a ground-up development of the GR4 core is a change in the licensing, which could open up the doors for a lot of people that are kind of hamstrung by their lawyers in the GPL, right? Without going too deep into that. So in terms of facilitating adoption, we have to consider the different users. So GRC only users, in theory, you could do a hot swap for them, right? If GRC is the front end, you could swap in whatever's running as long as it's quick enough. But we really have to consider the OOT developers and the people that have built things on top of GR. And the ecosystem is heavily built on out-of-tree modules. So which ones will migrate? How much effort, how much ability for people in the community is there going to be to take what I already have working in GR3 over to GR4? So unfortunately, in the transition from 3.7 to 3.10, there's a lot of modules that did not get updated, and some people went through. I forget the guy's name, but went through and did just module after module after module. But was Bjorn? Okay, yeah, and that was a big effort, very useful effort, but then not all of that got upstreamed back into the originating repos, so that work sits somewhere not entirely accessible. So even a small effort, like I think the transition from 3.7 to 3.10 wasn't a big effort to move your code that way, but a lot of people just didn't want to do it. So we have to think about that. And then the next step, okay, let's say we get to the point where lots of people are using GR4. It's building, we have maintenance of the core, it's become a community-run project. At what point can we say that's now GNU Radio? So I think to become an official GNU Radio release, obviously we have to get up to feature parity, we have to have examples, migration guides, and of course it has to be actively maintained. And I want to make a very strong statement that we do not plan on stopping support of GR3 really until we're at that point where the community has already moved over to 4.0. So GR3 is going to live on. If you've built stuff on GR3, there's a very active ecosystem. Really until no one feels like maintaining it anymore, that is GNU Radio for the time being. So I know that has been a point of concern for various people in the community, that the new shiny thing, squirrel, we're going to run after GR4, but that is not the case. So back to this, I really think that what it's going to take here back in this visual is we need an elevator here for these folks. We have to build the tools to make it easy to get from where we're at GR3 to GR4, and then also the tools for people to get that are not using GNU Radio onto GR4, and then that becomes GNU Radio. more. So that's really all I had to say on that. And I want to open up a Q&A session here, make this a bit more interactive. Sorry, I've been talking at you guys for an hour now, but make this a bit more interactive. I would be remiss if I did not mention GRCon 24, which is happening in a few weeks. If you're interested, or you know any of your colleagues might be interested, just gnuradio.org/grcon24, all the info's there. And yeah, we of course we can use your help a lot of different ways. GNUradio.org is the place to go for more information, and thank you.
So do you have any ideas on how long there's going to be the superposition between GNU Radio 3.10 and then 4? And is there going to be any evolution of the 3.10 from this point on, and how long?
Yeah, so there's still more things that we want to add to 3.2. You know, if you put 4.0 aside for the moment, you know, that I think I had a slide back there about various things that we want to add to 3.10. We want to continue to make GRC better based on Qt. We want to add support for SIGINT, and things will come along. Various people have you know, different requirements, things they want to add into it, and that's, you know, it does continue to be an actively maintained project, and that's not going to stop. In terms of how long that goes on, really depends on at what point 4.0 becomes something that resembles the same usability as GR3. So we want to continue to push on GR4 and find partners that can help us, you know, make that look more like, you know, bring in GRC into it and all of those aspects. But yeah, we expect those to live in parallel for some time.